Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is on assignment. Developing right now on Morning News Now, big decisions. This morning, the Supreme Court is set to make some of the final rulings of the term. Several consequential cases are still on the docket, including the fate of affirmative action in America.
There are high schools in this country that have manicured lawns and golf courses, and there are high schools in this country that have bars on the windows and metal detectors in the hallways, and yet we are asking both of those students to show up in our application process the same. Doesn't make any sense.
We have team coverage with the cases to watch and what it all means for you. Also this morning, more fallout from that short-lived revolt in Russia. President Vladimir Putin is now vowing justice against the so-called traitors who threatened his regime, while President Biden pushes back against claims that the West was involved. We'll bring you the latest. It has been a hot and humid start to the summer, and this morning more hazardous heat is stretching across the south, while parts of the Central Plains and Northeast brace for heavy rain, wind, even tornadoes. We're tracking the conditions. And it's the achievement of a lifetime for a special group of college grads, thanks to a first-of-its-kind prison education program offering inmates the chance at a college degree. We'll talk to one of the program's first graduates about the partnership that's giving some people hope for a better future. Good to have you with us on this Tuesday. We begin with what could be a blockbuster day in Washington. With just days left in this year's term, the Supreme Court will hand down its next round of opinions this morning, and that might include major rulings that could impact millions of Americans. We're talking about cases that focus on student loans, LGBTQ rights, and the future of affirmative action. And when it comes to affirmative action, like many other issues, Americans are firmly divided along party lines. An NBC News poll in April found that 80% of Democrats believed affirmative action was needed to counteract the effects of discrimination against minorities. That's up from 67% of Democrats way back in a 1991 poll. As for the GOP, today only 25% of Republicans support affirmative action. That is a huge drop from 30 years ago when that number was 55%. For more, we are joined by former prosecutor and MSNBC legal analyst Kristen Gibbons-Fedden. So it's actually two cases that are focused on affirmative action here in higher education. One involved Harvard, the other the University of North Carolina. Help us understand, what are both sides arguing on this contentious issue? What are the stakes here?
Well, the Supreme Court actually is hearing them as one case, even though they're two separate schools. And that's because the arguments are the same. Both schools, in this case, the decision, the Students for Fair Admissions Incorporated is actually arguing that both schools separately are discriminating against Asian American applicants, and that they're being disadvantaged in the application process because both of those schools are essentially, allegedly, overemphasizing race in the admissions process and rejecting workable race-neutral alternatives. And what does that have to do with the law? Well, they're arguing that the schools are violating the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination in institutions. The schools, alternatively, are arguing that they're not discriminating and that these policies are crucial for promoting diversity, and that their policies and methods are actually in line with precedent, specifically Grutter v. Bollinger and the Regents v. University of California v. Bake decisions, because those decisions permitted race-conscious admission of in the least restrictive.
So, Kristen, this is the most diverse Supreme Court in American history. It is also a conservative court. Conservatives hold a 6-3 majority. Usually when the arguments are made, the justices give us clues, a glimpse as to how they might vote. So does it look like they're going to side along those ideological lines, or were there perhaps a couple conservative justices who seemed more undecided?
I think an ideological ruling on these affirmative action cases would not come as a surprise, to be honest with you. But still, I think nuances do exist, as you kind of pointed out, within this conservative majority, with some conservatives showing kind of openness to contextual race consideration. If you think about those oral arguments for this particular case, we heard Chief Justice Roberts, along with Justices Barrett and Kavanaugh, may be revealing a small opening to considering personal experiences related to race to be part of the admissions policy. Now, that doesn't mean that they support race-conscious admissions, but it certainly gives some factors to play.
So, Kristen, we should note a couple decades ago, 9 states, that includes California and Florida, they actually banned affirmative action for college admissions. So does this ruling have any impact on those states?
Yeah, absolutely could bolster the legal position that those 9 states have already taken in their efforts to ban affirmative action. It also could influence other states to approach diversity in education in that way and ban it altogether, which really could result in a ruling that changes the trajectory of admission policies throughout the nation in a negative way.
Right there, we see those states that have already taken this step. All right, Kristen Gibbons-Fedden, thank you so much for your analysis this morning as we await this huge decision. Appreciate it. Colleges and universities are also grappling with the possibility that race may no longer be a factor in admissions. NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett shows us how they're preparing.
For many elite schools, the writing from the nation's high court is on the wall.
How worried are you? I'm extremely worried.
Danielle Hawley is the incoming president of Mount Holyoke College in Western Massachusetts. But this peaceful campus belies an anxious reality. The Supreme Court will answer the most anticipated question this term. Can colleges and universities look at race in admissions decisions?
Everyone is talking about this case all the time. People from departments that are not in the law school are asking me, what day will we hear?
For decades, the court recognized the educational benefits of a diverse student body and said schools can look at someone's race as one plus factor among many. But the court's current conservative majority may ban it nationwide this time.
What will that do to a place like Mount Holyoke?
It will send a very strong message to Black students and to Latina students that they are not welcome.
Not so, say the lawyers who sued Harvard over its admissions plan. Long treated by the court as the gold standard, it's now accused of being obsessed with race, and along with the University of North Carolina, of discriminating against Asian students, which the schools deny but was emphasized during oral arguments.
Asians should be getting into Harvard more than whites, but they don't because Harvard gives them significantly lower personal ratings. Harvard ranks Asians less likable, confident, and kind.
If the court agrees using race violates the law, schools may still look at an applicant's finances, zip code, or even consider essays about overcoming adversity, so-called race-neutral alternatives.
Universities just cannot consider race itself.
Colleges tell NBC News they are prepared to adapt if required, expanding financial aid, scrapping SAT scores, or getting rid of legacy admissions, all potentially on the table. But Hawley says ignoring race would produce a devastating result.
We've seen a track record of them not working.
She points to California, one of 9 states that outlawed affirmative action more than 20 years ago, causing a 50% drop-off in minority admissions, numbers that have never bounced back, as seen by UC Berkeley.
I have struggled to really move the Black number here at Berkeley, and that, again, that's not from a lack of trying.
Femi Ogundele, Berkeley's Dean of Undergrad Admissions, says affirmative action was never perfect, just a Band-Aid.
The fact that there are high schools in this country that have manicured lawns and golf courses, and there are high schools in this country that have bars on the windows and metal detectors in the hallways, and yet we are asking both of those students to show up in our application process the same, doesn't make any sense.
For now, schools are bracing for the dawn of a new era, making the task of equalizing the playing field not impossible, but significantly harder. Laura Jarrett, NBC News, South Hadley, Massachusetts.
Turning overseas now, and Russia is dealing with the aftermath of Saturday's aborted mutiny by the mercenary Wagner group. This morning, we heard from Russia's FSB, that's the main security service in Russia. The FSB said that it was closing its criminal investigation into the armed rebellion. On top of that, Russian state media, citing the defense ministry, said preparations were underway for the transfer of the group's heavy military equipment to Russia's armed forces. The steps come after both President Putin and the head of the Wagner Group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, spoke yesterday for the first time since the incident. President Biden also addressed the short-lived mutiny. Take a listen to what he said.
We made clear that we were not involved. We had nothing to do with it. This was part of a struggle within the Russian system. We're going to keep assessing the fallout of this weekend's events and the implications for Russia and Ukraine. But it's still too early to reach a definitive conclusion about where this is going.
NBC News foreign correspondent Kelly Kobiea joins us now from Kyiv. So, Kelly, walk us through the steps that were actually taken by Moscow this morning. Why is the FSB dropping its case against the Wagner Group?
So, Joe, the statement is pretty short, but what the FSB says is essentially the reason those cases are being dropped is because the soldiers involved, those Wagner fighters, didn't march all the way to Moscow because they stopped, turned around, and in the FSB's words, the actions aimed at committing a crime didn't happen. It falls in line with this deal that was orchestrated, put together by the president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, in which the Kremlin announced on Saturday that none of these fighters, nor any of the leaders, frankly, would be held accountable, that none of them would be charged criminally. And at this point, you have an interesting situation developing because President Putin last night said that he would honor terms of that deal and he would allow Wagner fighters as well to choose their fate, essentially. They could go home, they could join the Russian military, or they could go to Belarus. And that leads on to this statement by the defense ministry, the Russian state media citing the defense ministry, saying that they're turning over all of their equipment. So the question remains, do they join the Russian military? Do they stay in the fight in Ukraine? Or do they sort of join their leader, Prigozhin, in Belarus? Joe?
You know, Kelly, we know President Putin spoke again a little earlier this morning, giving a speech to the military and law enforcement. That's in addition to his speech yesterday. So what are we hearing from Putin right now? And what about Prigozhin's comments? Do we even know if he made it to Belarus?
Sure. So Putin spoke in the heart of the Kremlin today. It was very much about imagery, standing in front of soldiers, giving this speech, thanking the security services for, he said, for doing their job, telling the National Guard essentially that they helped to stop a civil war in Ukraine. And also, for the first time, I think, recognizing that Russian pilots were killed on Saturday during this insurrection, holding a minute's silence for those pilots during those talks today. Interestingly, he also said that he was not ruling out that Western security services could have been involved in Saturday's event, saying that it may have been inspired by the West and overlapped with Prigozhin's ambitions. In his speech last night, he went further. He called the leaders of that movement traitors, but he did say that the overwhelming majority of Wagner fighters were patriots, and he was almost asking them to join the fold, to stay within the Russian military. Prigozhin, for his part, said he never meant to mount a coup. He was only on a protest march. And in terms of his whereabouts, Joe, we still can't confirm that he's in Belarus, but his plane has been tracked through Flight Radar 24 as going from St. Petersburg to southern Russia and then to Minsk, the Belarusian capital, at some point this morning.
Of course, we should add President Biden denying any American involvement here. Kelly, meanwhile, there is still a war going on in Ukraine. Real quick, what's the latest on the battlefield?
Yeah, President Zelensky projecting the image of hope, of progress. He said there's been progress on all fronts. He visited troops on the front line yesterday. That video has been playing quite a bit here over the past few hours. And he said that they've looked at operational decisions as well. Whether that means there's some sort of change in strategy on the battlefield, we don't know. But they are sort of projecting this image of unity, strength, and progress on this side.
Right. Kelly Kobiea in Kyiv. Kelly, thank you so much. Let's bring in Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis for more on this. He is a senior fellow and military expert at Defense Priorities. Good to have you with us. So first off, I just want to get your reaction to these moves by Moscow this morning. Are you surprised the FSB is dropping its criminal case into this armed mutiny? What do you think that means?
Yeah, I think that what that's telling you is that Russia just wants to move past this with the least amount of collateral damage as possible. Putin wants to preserve his warfighting capacity as much as he can, both within the regular military and potentially with Wagner forces going forward. And, if they had gone forward with any kind of criminal proceedings, it would have been really hard to try to pick which one of the Wagner group, that you would go after. And then, of course, you have the problem that Wagner is a very close-knit family kind of an organization. They build that into their system, and it could potentially have turned all of them against them. So I think that to try to minimize the damage, they felt that it was better to go this direction. And hence the reason why Putin actually offered them to join the Russian military or allowed them to go to Belarus or home.
Did you hear anything from Putin's comments or Prigozhin that suggests this whole episode is actually over? I mean, do you think the Wagner group is going to go quietly?
Yes, I do, because, look, this never had a chance to succeed if it was actually some sort of insurrection. Because, look, the Wagner group gets all of its supplies, ammunition, fuel, vehicles, aircraft, everything from the Ministry of Defense. So without the Ministry of Defense supporting them, all they had with the bullets they had in their truck, and, that would have run out quickly. So they never really had a chance to succeed. They could have caused a huge problem. And I think that Prigozhin probably actually did want to get rid of the Minister of Defense and the senior general Gerasimov. It appears that didn't work. And in fact, it appears that his gamble did fail because now he's lost control of the Wagner group to some extent. Though I will point out that there's news this morning that Belarus is now building a new military base for the Wagner groups of about 8,000 people, which they're trying to get up to very quick. So it appears that they're going to regenerate in some form in Belarus.
Let's talk about what this means for the war in Ukraine. This aborted mutiny was brief, but did it present an opportunity for Ukraine to make gains in the war? I mean, how do you assess this counteroffensive so far?
Everybody would love that to be the case, and certainly Kiev wanted that to be the case. They looked for it, but the problem is that this offensive has been almost a uniform failure from what it should have been doing and what they wanted it to do from the outset. In that, after now 3 full weeks of this offensive, they have still not penetrated even the first line of the Russians' defense. And the reasons are fundamental. They don't have anywhere near enough air power, air defense, artillery shells, and they don't have enough demining equipment to get through the many belts of Russian defenses. And you had Kirby yesterday really illustrating the problem when he emphasized how well the Russian defense had trained and prepared and how hard it is to go forward, implying that this probably isn't going to go too much further. And that's certainly something I agree with.
All right. Lieutenant Colonel Davis, appreciate your analysis. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Always my pleasure. Thank you.
The severe weather that has been impacting huge sections of the country for days is showing no signs of letting up. The Northeast is dealing with severe storms, while the South is bracing for more suffocating heat. And the severe weather is creating a travel nightmare at airports all across the country. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock brings us the latest.
Good morning. For anyone who's spent a considerable amount of time in Louisiana over the summer, conditions here can be brutal, even by that standard. We are looking at an exceptional set of circumstances right now. Most of southeast Louisiana is under an excessive heat warning, which is to say somewhere in the range of low triple-digit temperatures, but then a heat index factoring in humidity that feels around 113 to as much as 120 degrees, according to the city of New Orleans. Now, I'm right now in Baton Rouge. This warning includes Baton Rouge, Slidell, and New Orleans, which is going to be holding a public event later today. The mayor there, LaToya Cantrell, updating the public on what they're doing to keep people safe. That includes opening up dozens of pools and community centers, cooling centers, as folks here are dealing with just oppressive heat. There is a heat dome right now that is just sitting over a section of the country. Nearly 50 million people are under an excessive heat warning. That spreads over 13 states. We're talking about really from Arizona and New Mexico all the way through Texas, Oklahoma, Alabama, Mississippi, even parts of Florida. So this is a huge swath of the country right now that is buckling from this heat, while at the same time, we've seen all of these severe thunderstorms really up and down the East Coast. Was the most recent activity from the Carolinas all the way to New Hampshire. There was flooding in Pennsylvania. In New Hampshire, actually, folks were forced out of their homes, or at least surrounded by water, as roads were literally being washed away. So you have this juxtaposition right now of active weather, tornadic activity. There were some 6 reported tornadoes in Wyoming, another one in Nebraska. That all continues as the heat really right now is sinking in the southern part of the United States. one more point to make here, which is just the power outages. Tennessee right now is the worst state with some 70,000 customers without power. Texas, we've talked about ERCOT before and the electricity. They are at about 10 or 11,000 people without power. ERCOT, which manages that 90% of the electrical load for the state of Texas, says that the grid conditions right now are normal. They're not asking people to conserve, but to be wise with their energy usage. Here in Louisiana, it's a few thousand people without power, but everyone right now bracing for what's ahead because this excessive heat is supposed to extend not just today, but through the rest of the week and into the weekend. That's the latest here in Baton Rouge. Back to you.
All right, Sam Brock, thank you so much. So that's the question. Any relief in sight? Let's get a check at your Morning News Now weather forecast with meteorologist Michelle Grossman. Hey, Michelle, good morning.
Hey there, Joe. Great to see you. And unfortunately, I wish we could say there was an end in sight, but this is going to continue for days. And as Sam mentioned, into the weekend, we've been tracking this for weeks and weeks and weeks, and we're going to continue to track it. We're also tracking the chance for severe storms. We had some really heavy rainfall, some strong storms in the Northeast last night. We're going to see that reignite later on today. Also watching the chance for some strong storms in the middle of the country. So radar showing us that story where you see the brighter colors, the reds, the oranges, the yellows throughout the plains. We're going to see the chance for some strong storms throughout the central plains later on today, and also the chance for some really heavy downpours in the Northeast. This is why we have that cold front that's moving through. It's moving off to the east. We have an area of low pressure that's sort of spinning over the Great Lakes. That's moving along with it. So it's bringing the chance for those storms from Maine to South Carolina. And you see those bright colors once again. That's where we're anticipating the chance for heavy rainfall. We had that, as Sam mentioned, overnight where we saw over 6 inches in some spots in the Northeast. And we're going to add to those totals today. Then tomorrow, more rounds of showers developing across the New England area. Locally, heavy rain is possible once again, so that could lead to some flooding as it did last night. Rainfall amounts anywhere from a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch up to an inch plus. Where you see the oranges and reds, that's where we're anticipating the chance for some heavy downpours. So that's really going to be locally heavy downpours. It's sort of hard to pinpoint where that will fall. We do have a severe weather threat later on this afternoon. Less than yesterday, 6 million still though at risk for winds gusting up to 70 miles per hour, damaging hail 2 inches or larger. Also a few tornadoes where you see the orange, including Dodge City, Woodward, also Tulsa. That's an enhanced risk. That is the likeliest spot of where we will see those storms. And this graphic sort of shows you where we could see hurricane force winds. So 75+ mile per hour winds in the hatched area. That includes also Tulsa, Woodward, and Dodge City. Then tomorrow we're going to see that severe weather threat move into the Midwest. So Minneapolis, you could see some strong storms tomorrow with winds gusting over 60 miles per hour, some hail, and also the chance of a tornado. That's the storm story. Then we have the record highs where we're going to see temperatures soaring into the triple digits once again. And look at all these heat alerts stretching from the southwest parts of Arizona into the south central states, the Florida panhandle, but now stretching into parts of the Ohio Valley. So we're talking about Indiana, even the Tennessee Valley, Kentucky, Tennessee. You're involved in some heat alerts. That starts on Thursday, but we're going to see this heat dome expanding because this high pressure is anchored in place and it's not going to budge. 49 million Americans under some sort of heat alert. We do have excessive heat warnings once again in Texas, and this is why. Temperatures into the triple digits. Houston, 100 degrees, and then we're going to factor in the humidity. So feeling like 107 in Houston today, 109 in Shreveport, and Joe, we're going to feel like 111 in Lake Charles. And these numbers are going to look very similar as we head towards tomorrow and the rest of the work week.
Looks like that for the last few days. Sounds like it'll look like it for a few more days. All right, Michelle, thank you so much. Coming up on Morning News Now, you could say she is the cutest rapper in the game.
My name is Van Van. I'm time to play, playing outside every day.
Later this hour, we're going to introduce you to this 4-year-old freestyle phenom who's spitting bars and taking TikTok by storm. Up first, though, there are new developments this morning in the investigation into the implosion of that tourist submersible. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Victims of the Club Q mass shooting in Colorado called out the suspect for his crimes during an emotional sentencing hearing. Anderson Lee Aldrich pleaded guilty to 5 counts of first-degree murder as part of his plea deal. The 23-year-old received the maximum punishment and will serve 5 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole for the shooting at an LGBTQ nightclub in Colorado Springs last November. The investigation into the Titan submersible disaster is well underway. U.S. and Canadian officials are talking with the crew of the Titan's mothership as they try to figure out what caused the implosion. All 5 people on board were killed on their way to tour the Titanic last week. NBC News correspondent Tom Costello has the latest.
At the site of last week's disaster, salvage teams are now collecting the debris from the mini-submersible named Titan that imploded not far from the wreck of the Titanic. Canadian investigators have now boarded the Polar Prince that served as the mothership, retrieving the voyage data recorder and interviewing crew and victims' family members who were on board. Among them, Christine Dawood, who lost her husband Shahzada and their 19-year-old son Suleiman.
When we passed the 96 hours mark, that's when I lost hope.
She told the BBC Suleiman was looking forward to the trip.
It was supposed to be Shahzada and I going down. But then I stepped back and gave the space to Suleiman because he really wanted to go.
The investigations now underway include Canada's Transportation Safety Board and Royal Canadian Mounted Police, as well as a Coast Guard Marine Board of Investigation leading the U.S. investigation.
It can make recommendations to the proper authorities to pursue civil or criminal sanctions as necessary.
Investigators will look at whether now deceased OceanGate CEO Stockton Rush ignored outside warnings that the sub's carbon fiber shell could fail at crushing depths. As for who pays for the search, 13,000 square miles, 11 ships, 4 planes, 5 ROVs. No official cost estimate, but the Coast Guard says it doesn't charge for life-saving operations. That's its job. Anyone missing at sea deserves to be rescued.
All right, Tom, thank you so much. International news now, starting in Egypt, where a 14-story building collapsed, injuring several people. NBC News foreign correspondent Claudio Lavaga joins us with that and other world news. Claudio, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. Officials in Egypt say at least 4 people were injured and several others are feared to be trapped beneath the rubble after a 13-story apartment building collapsed in the city of Alexandria. Now, the governor of Alexandria said all apartments were occupied by holidaymakers visiting the city in a summer break and that the building had been scheduled for demolition months ago. While the search for survivors continues, an investigation has been opened on the cause of collapse. Now, let's come back here in Rome, where a tourist has been filmed while he carved into the stone of the Colosseum his and his girlfriend's name using a key. Italy's culture minister called it a sign of great incivility and said he hopes the man will be identified and sanctioned according to the law. If caught, the tourist could face a fine of tens of thousands of dollars and even jail time. And let's go to Singapore, where the first esports Olympics came to an end. Organizers say the event builds bridges between the physical and the virtual worlds of sport. Over 130 players from around the world came together to compete. Well, thankfully, the gold, silver and bronze medals were real and not virtual. Well, Joe, finally, some Olympic Games I can aspire to compete in. I don't know about you. But
yeah, we can participate, but I still don't think we can medal either. All right, Claudio, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
No.
Coming up, 3 police officers now charged with murder. They're accused of shooting and killing a disabled woman inside her home. What we're learning this morning about what happened. Plus, researchers are defining a new type of depression. More on the symptoms and what can be done to treat it. This is Morning News Now. We're back with new details on 3 San Antonio police officers charged with murder after shooting a woman inside her own apartment Friday. The woman's family says that she was disabled and had a mental health condition. Now, we do want to warn you, some may find the body camera video in this story disturbing. NBC News correspondent Dana Griffin has the details.
It was just after midnight.
Lady, get over here.
San Antonio police were responding to a vandalism call. 46-year-old Melissa Perez was suspected of cutting wires to a fire alarm system at an apartment complex.
Get over here.
When officers tried to talk to her, police say she locked herself inside her apartment. As the officer removes the screen to Perez's open window, she throws a glass candle at the officer, according to police.
You're gonna get shot!
Shoot me!
After waiting for backup, 2 officers jump onto her patio. Police say she swung a hammer, shattering a window while still inside her apartment. This is what happened next. Paramedics pronounce Perez dead at the scene. She leaves behind 4 children.
It appeared that Ms. Perez was having a mental health crisis.
Perez's daughter says she had schizophrenia.
I wish they would have told her, like, she wasn't alone. We're here to help you. In the video, she's just terrified. You can tell, like, she's going through something.
Sergeant Alfred Flores and officers Eleazar Alejandro and Nathaniel Villalobos were suspended without pay and later arrested on murder charges. According to court documents, they have since been released on bond.
The shooting officer's actions were not consistent with SAPD's policy and training.
Our thanks to Dana Griffin for that story. The officers involved have not commented on the case, but the police union says the chief followed all necessary protocols. The officers are expected to be back in court in July. Time now for our weekly mental health check-in. This morning, we're taking a look at new symptoms for depression. We're going to break down how one study could change how we treat depression. Plus, research shows that more people are feeling the pressure to lose weight for the summer. We have tips on how you can feel comfortable in the skin you're in. Let's bring in board-certified psychiatrist Dr. Sue Varma for more on this. Dr. Varma, good to have you with us. So let's start with that depression study. Scientists at Stanford Medicine found what they're calling a new category of depression, the cognitive biotype. So walk us through what that means, because I don't understand it just based on the name. What are the symptoms? How do we go about treating it?
Yes. So, look, the symptoms are nothing new. The symptoms are typical symptoms of depression, but they're more pronounced, the cognitive symptoms in this cognitive biotype, specifically of executive functioning, decision-making, memory, focus, concentration, being able to suppress negative emotions in favor of having positive behavior, deciding what is needed in a specific situation. And we find that 27% of people actually have this biotype. And the people who have this are less likely to respond to the typical antidepressants that they might get, something like a Zoloft or a Prozac. And this is so helpful to know, because typically people get so demoralized and they're like, doc, these medications are not working. And we're finding that a particular type of treatment, which, again, it's been in existence for a long time, but we're finding that a medication called guanfacine might be useful. Transcranial magnetic stimulation, which has been around for many years, is being studied. Cognitive behavioral therapy, gold standard for treatment of depression. So we're finding that there are a variety of treatments that already exist, but could be very helpful.
All right. Now, just a few moments ago, we were talking about the weather. We are just officially 1 week into summer, but the temperatures are already soaring around the country. The warm weather also means that more people might be uncomfortable with their appearance. Maybe they have to wear a bathing suit. Why does summer bring all these added pressures to look a certain way? And what are some of the strategies you recommend to help people deal with the stress that comes with that?
Look, we're showing more skin in the summer. It's harder to hide under the sweaty, the baggy sweatpants that we've been wearing. And a couple key things to keep in mind. Don't avoid social interaction as a result of fearing having to wear a bathing suit. Make adjustments. Some of those might be mental adjustments, such as reframing a situation to say, instead of how horrible do I look? Could you say to yourself, how much does my body do for me? Can you do concrete things to say, I'm going to wear looser fitting clothes? Can I get clothes for the body I have, not necessarily the body I want or the body I once had? Could you engage in distraction? So if you're with friends and if you're feeling uncomfortable because you're like, oh my God, they've got the six pack and I don't, can you focus on having fun? And then I would say get help. Cognitive behavioral therapy for body image issues can be extremely helpful to help us have mindfulness, to be in the moment, to learn distraction and to learn reframing, and to be able to focus on having a good time where we are.
I like one of the tips that's on there, do what's best for you. I think that's always some good advice. Finally, Dr. Varma, more people are turning to their phones to find mindfulness in their day, often with some pretty useful apps. But I'm hearing it might be backfiring. Why is that? So is it possible to use our phones to find clarity?
I think so. I think, the apps are very helpful in that they have, it could be a reminder that you have to take the time off to do the meditation, but people are afraid that you're going to be getting distracted, that you're going to be getting text messages or phone calls while you're on it. So I would say put on your do not disturb or sleep mode on the phone when you're using it. And also keep in mind that it's just one more tool. And like any tool, they want you to focus more time on the app. So they're going to be enticing you with a lot of content and pulling you into it. And so then it becomes one more thing that you then get entrenched into, as opposed to the apps are meant to help you be mindful in your daily life. So I would say, if as much as possible, go out there in the world, walk, put your phone away, see if you can do without it. But if not, it can be a very useful tool amongst many others.
Yeah, maybe don't finish your meditation session and then immediately check your email or check social media. Take a little break for a moment.
And I'm guilty of that myself.
Exactly. All right. Dr. Sue Varma, as always, thank you so much. Coming up, a new push to make the internet accessible to all. Up next, we're going to tell you about the plan by the White House to try and get high-speed internet in every home in America. Plus, education from behind bars. We're going to talk about the new program that's offering prison inmates the chance to earn their college degree. You're watching Morning News Now. We're back now with a push from the White House to give every American home access to high-speed internet. President Biden unveiled the plan yesterday, kicking off the second phase of the administration's Investing in America tour. The White House says providing high-speed internet is a necessity in today's society.
We're taking another big step toward internet for all. We're announcing over $40 billion to be distributed to 50 states, Washington, D.C., and territories to deliver high-speed internet in places where there's neither service or it's too slow.
NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli joins us now. Mike, good morning. So explain to us how this multi-billion-dollar initiative came to be. How's the plan going to work?
Well, Joe, according to the White House, 7% of the country, that's 8.5 million households, have limited or no access at all to high-speed internet. And this was a gap that was really magnified by the pandemic. Think about how much of our lives had to move online. The president likes to talk about how many people had to drive to the parking lot of a fast food chain to get online, for instance, so that their students can do their online learning. Well, this is a gap that is now being helped to fill by the bipartisan infrastructure law. We think of that law and think it's filling potholes and bridges, but part of it is also $42 billion to really expand broadband access across the country. Listen to the president yesterday laying out what this will mean for average Americans.
It's the biggest investment in high-speed internet ever, because for today's economy to work for everyone, internet access is just as important as electricity was, or water, or other basic services. With this funding, along with other federal investments, we're going to be able to connect every person in America to reliable, high-speed internet by 2030.
Now, Joe, this is the kickoff event yesterday at the White House for a 3-week administration-wide, national, almost campaign-style Invest in America tour. The president, as part of that, is going to be heading to Chicago tomorrow to give what the White House is billing as a major economic address on what they call Bidenomics, this idea of growing the economy from the middle out and the bottom up.
Yeah, and White House officials are comparing this plan to FDR's effort to bring electricity to rural America back in the 30s. So tell us, how's the money going to be distributed? And, you know, a lot of us take for granted the fact that we live in cities, we have internet, but remind us some of the challenges that some parts of the country face when it comes to getting this internet access.
So the announcement yesterday was to kick off the funding that's now being distributed by the Commerce Department. Every state is going to be receiving at least $107 million through this program. 19 states are going to be receiving more than $1 billion. And that funding was determined in part by which states have the least service and the least connectivity. For instance, West Virginia, a smaller state, is going to be receiving one of the biggest pots of money, more than $1 billion. Senator Joe Manchin, no small player in the White House activities of late, was at the White House yesterday for this announcement. Now, one of the challenges, it has to do with building the infrastructure to expand broadband access in the first place. The Commerce Department also announcing a separate pot of funding to build that, to install fiber optic cables and the like to make this possible.
You know, and Mike, can't ignore the politics here. This comes as the president's running for re-election, his job performance remaining steady, 43% of Americans approving of his performance in our latest NBC News poll. Real quick, what can we expect from the president as this campaign really kicks underway?
A lot of fundraising, Joe. We're at the last week of the fundraising period. So the president's focus beyond those economic speeches is raising a lot of money. Today, he's heading to suburban Washington, D.C. to do that. He'll be flying to Chicago to give that speech, but also raise money. And then I'll be heading to join you in New York on Thursday, where the president also has fundraisers. But this Invest in America tour is also meant to really try to turn the focus back to the economy, what the White House thinks it has a strong case to make on, but obviously a lot of challenges and competition for the headlines here.
All right, Mike, we will see you soon. Thank you so much. Speaking of money, let's get to some money news. Congress is cracking down on artificial intelligence for staffers. CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us with that and other money news. Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning. That's right. Congress is limiting staffers from using ChatGPT and other generative AI tools. Now, Axios reports the House Administrative Chief is setting narrow conditions for staffers. They can only use the paid ChatGPT Plus service due to its tighter privacy controls and only for research and evaluation. House offices are only allowed to use the chatbot with public data, and privacy features have to be manually set. Congress has introduced bills to require disclaimers for uses of generative AI in things like political ads. And TikTok is adding a content filtering tool to its family pairing offering. Now, it allows parents to link their account to their teen's profile to enable content and privacy settings. Content filters lets users exclude videos with words or hashtags they don't want to see in their For You or following feeds. TikTok says that this will let parents reduce the chances their kids view content they may find jarring. WhatsApp says its business app now has more than 200 million monthly active users. That's 4 times the number of users it had in 2020. Meta, which owns WhatsApp, says businesses will soon be able to publish ads directly to Facebook or Instagram from WhatsApp with no Facebook account required. Meta is also testing letting businesses automatically send personalized messages to their customers for a fee, Joe. Sounds like something good for business owners.
Absolutely, definitely. Yep. All right, thank you so much. Appreciate it, Silvana. This morning, we want to introduce you to a program that's giving incarcerated people a chance to earn a college degree. The Yale Prison Education Initiative and the University of New Haven are teaming up, creating an opportunity that, for most of the participants, had been historically out of reach. Joining us now is Marcus T. Harvin, who is one of the first graduates of the program. We're also joined by Zelda Rowland. She is the founding director of the Yale Prison Education Initiative and director of the University of New Haven Prison Education Program. Good morning to both of you. Grateful to have you with us. Zelda, let's start with you and just get a little bit of background here. Tell us about the partnership and how this got started.
Well, thank you for having us. So the program, the Yale Prison Education Initiative, was first started as a program of Dwight Hall, Yale Center for Public Service and Social Justice, in 2016. So it took actually 2 years for us to be able to convince Yale to let us offer credit-bearing courses in prison. But in 2018, we did offer real, rigorous, credit-bearing Yale classes for incarcerated students in Connecticut. And we had 600 people in a prison of 1,500 apply for our first 12 spots in a 12-person seminar. So that demonstrated to us the extraordinary need for programs like this and the desire to enroll in them. In 2021, we were able to establish an incredible partnership across Yale and University of New Haven that was funded through a transformative grant from the Mellon Foundation so that we could begin to offer degrees for students inside. So this program is extremely rigorous. We're offering access to the same quality, the same level of courses taught by the same instructors who teach on campus. It's competitive to get in. And it's funded primarily by private grants and foundations.
So, Marcus, all that makes what you've accomplished even more incredible. Congratulations to you on graduating. I mean, you're part of the very first pioneering class for this program. What does that mean to you? What was your motivation for wanting to get your degree?
Well, thank you, first and foremost, for this opportunity and for the congratulations. The driving force behind my decision to enroll in the Yale Prison Education Initiative was my grandmother, Sally Mae Harvin, who departed this earth on February 15th, 2021. She is my sole motivating factor in pursuing a higher education. I promised her at her request that I would finish college and become a criminal defense attorney, and Zelda and the Yale Prison Education Initiative made it possible for me to keep that promise alive to my grandmother.
So, I mean, Marcus, you're a full-time student at the University of New Haven now. What is next for you? What do you want to do? What are you hoping to accomplish to fulfill that promise you made? Well,
I think I'm a little more than a full-time student at UNH. I'm also a fellow at UNH right now in their President's Public Service Fellowship. I'm working with the neighborhood housing services in my hometown, in the actual community I was born and raised in, New Hallville. So I'm actually being able to put my hands in the ground and begin to make a difference. And right now, I'm beginning ministry. I'm at my church, Pitts Chapel Unified Free Will Baptist Church in New Haven. So I'm just living out my dreams and trying to purchase every pair of Jordans that Nike has made and make my children proud, try to be the superhero they believe me to be. And to help change the world, man. I was denied an attorney when I was on trial. So if I can be the attorney that that person needs, because I have the pain that that person had at that moment, I'm going to do it by God's help and his grace. That's why I'm here, and that's what I'm going to keep doing.
Zelda, that must just bring a smile to your face when you hear that. I mean, many of the students who've entered the program, they might feel marginalized. They may never even thought of pursuing higher education. They didn't think it was a possibility for them. What was it like for you to see this first graduating class complete the program?
It was incredible. I mean, it's a real testament to the extraordinary potential of students in prison, to the sort of brain power that we've locked away behind bars. The mission of this program is about seeking extraordinary students from all over the world and educating them with the aim of cultivating future leaders and citizens. And Marcus and the other graduates, to me, are, as universities, it is our responsibility to invest in future leaders who might be impacted, who might be in prison today, who are just as impacted and out in the world and doing extraordinary things like Marcus. It's incredible.
Zelda Rowland, thank you for everything you're doing. Marcus T. Harvin, you are an inspiration. Thank you for joining us this morning, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much.
All right, coming up, she is spitting rhymes at just 4 years old. We're just going to play that for the rest of the hour. Up next, we'll introduce you to Van Van, who's gone viral with her adorable raps. This is Morning News Now. Welcome back. Did you ever dream of living in Barbie's dream house? Well, dust off those pink accessories because it's no longer a dream. Starting July 17th, anyone can request to book Ken's room in Barbie's dream house. It's a real-life pink mansion in Malibu, California. Selected winners will stay in the house on July 21st and 22nd, free of charge. The newly renovated dream house offers a look at Ken's wardrobe, lessons in line dancing, an infinity pool, and, of course, exclusive pieces like Ken's yellow and pink skates. It's being offered by Airbnb to celebrate the release of the long-awaited Barbie movie, and Airbnb will make a donation to save the children. Finally, this hour, June is African American Music Appreciation Month, and one young hip-hop star is making her mark. She might even look a little familiar. Her dances and songs have racked up millions of views online. NBC News correspondent Zincle Esawa brings us her story.
Hey. Playing outside every day.
This 4-year-old is a rap phenom taking the internet by storm.
My name is Van Van. I'm trying to play. Playing outside every day. My name is Van McConaughey,
a.k.a. rapper Van Van.
Savannah, I've heard you rapping. When did you start doing that?
Since I was a kid.
Savannah's dad, Reggie McConaughey, says he started recording her rhymes when Savannah was just 2 years old.
Even if she wasn't talking that well, just a cadence, a pattern.
A sense of rhythm.
Right. People love seeing her on camera.
Make sure I download my song.
Today, she's got over 200,000 Instagram followers and about 4.3 million likes on TikTok. The pair posting her videos online starting in 2020. Reggie says while working from home as an educator during the pandemic, music and entertainment became their special bond.
My name is Van Van. I'm trying to play. Playing outside every day.
We just wanted to have fun.
Van Van, what do your friends think of all the videos you've made now?
They'd be like, wow.
Van Van even giving us an exclusive performance.
I will show it to y'all.
Unfortunately, we didn't have a beat on hand for the budding rap star.
Put on the thing first. The thing first, I can't remember.
Oh, you need the beat.
But like any good performer,
It's fine.
the show must go on.
My name is Van Van. I come playing outside every day.
Yeah. Okay.
I come play, you know hot. Quarter like top box. Round in that big wheel. Van Van, I'm a big deal.
Her undeniable charm and online popularity leading to offline opportunities with her first live performance in her home state of North Carolina in May.
And honestly, I think I was more nervous than her. If it ever comes to a time where she don't want to do it, then we'll just stop. And she'll just go back to being Savannah, you know what I'm saying?
Van Van says she has big dreams of becoming a rapper and an actress. But for now, her next starring role is Big Sister, her parents expecting in August.
I'm super excited. She gonna be an actress with me too.
Do you have any advice for other 4-year-olds, young girls who maybe admire you?
Just work hard.
Just work hard.
Playing outside every day.
Sibling is coming. I see a collaboration in the works. Sid and Clay, thank you so much. If you can't get enough of Van Van, then you can catch her performing live at the Essence Festival this weekend for the celebration of the 50th anniversary of hip-hop. That does it for this hour of Morning News Now. The news continues right now. Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is on assignment. Right now on Morning News Now, weathering the storms. This morning, no relief from the heat for millions of Americans bracing for another dangerous day of extremely high temperatures across the South. Plus, a threat of severe storms from the Central Plains to the East Coast. And it's all playing out as we close in on the busy July 4th travel holiday weekend, with delays now piling up at several major airports. We've got your coast-to-coast forecast in a moment, plus how Mother Nature could affect your holiday weekend. Also, charges dropped new this morning, a dramatic development in the fallout of that short-lived Russian rebellion. President Vladimir Putin taking to the airwaves last night to talk about the armed uprising this past weekend. And he made a surprise announcement. What he calls the Wagner Group mutineers, they won't face any charges from Moscow. But how is the rest of the world reacting to Putin's message? And does the man behind that attempted coup still remain a threat? We've got the latest analysis. Well, in Washington, it's another crucial decision day over at the Supreme Court. As the 9 justices enter their final week of the current term, still on the docket this morning, major cases we've been keeping an eye on, cases that could have a huge impact on higher education in America. That includes affirmative action when it comes to college admissions and the Biden administration's student loan forgiveness plan. We are watching it all. And it's electric. It is being called the future of racing, with no gas, no gears, and pit stops, well, they're now a thing of the past. Formula E, as it's known, is taking the circuits by storm, though you might not hear it coming. Bringing that story in a little bit, we're going to start this hour with the extreme weather that has been impacting huge sections of the country for days, and it is showing no signs of letting up. Severe storms batter the Northeast with high winds and heavy rain, while in the South they are bracing for yet another round of sweltering heat. Parts of the region are seeing temperatures that continue to spike in the triple digits again today. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock joins us now from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, with the latest. Sam, good morning.
Joe, good morning. Emphasis on the word extreme. Even in a state like Louisiana that is known for brutal conditions over the summer, this is going to be pretty bad. Southeast Louisiana, Joe, right now is under an excessive heat warning from Baton Rouge, where I am, to Slidell to New Orleans, which is warning its residents they might feel temperatures that are up to 120 degrees today with humidity, storms right now, and scorching heat smothering the country.
This morning, a stretch of destructive storms slamming the East Coast from the Carolinas to the Northeast.
Holy sh**. Branches are falling off the trees right now.
In Pennsylvania, heavy rain prompting flash flood alerts. While hail reaching over an inch in diameter, rattling towns, including this neighborhood in Virginia. Down south, the problem is the sweltering heat, a dangerous heat dome now stretching across the region. Excessive heat alerts are impacting some 49 million people across 13 states. And at the center of the dome, Texas, where many cities are sweating through their third straight week of unrelenting and in some cases, record-breaking heat.
I've been here for, since I was in elementary school, and it's never been this bad.
ERCOT, the state's power grid operator, breaking an unofficial all-time June demand record on Monday and forecasting demand to reach uncharted territory again today, but saying grid conditions are expected to be normal. Officials urging residents to cut back on power usage and to go outside during the coolest hours of the day.
We expect heat and humidity to continue into the triple digits throughout this week.
Meanwhile, at least 6 tornadoes have been reported in Wyoming, while this scary-looking rope tornado touching down in rural Nebraska. This trifecta of brutal conditions, rain, wind, and heat, causing misery coast to coast.
And while there is no historical database for heat index, New Orleans very well, Joe, may tie or break its all-time temperature records this week. As for the power situation across the country right now, roughly 200,000 customers with no power. The worst state, Tennessee, with nearly 70,000 customers with no power, as these temperatures just keep soaring higher and higher. Joe, back to you.
Try our best to stay cool. Sam, thank you so much. All that severe weather is having a major impact at the nation's airports. Thousands of travelers are facing delays and cancellations. And, of course, it comes just ahead of the 4th of July holiday weekend. NBC News correspondent Tom Costello is at Reagan National with the latest. So, Tom, catch us up to date. What is happening right now at the airports? What can you expect if you're heading there today?
Yeah, it depends on where you are, of course, and whether the weather is good. At the moment, we've got blue skies here in Washington, but we still have a residual effect from yesterday. 2,200 flight cancellations nationwide yesterday alone, and yesterday we also had about, let me double check the numbers here, 8,500 delays. Here's where we stand at this hour nationwide on the system. About 800 cancellations at this very moment, about 850 or so delays. Here are the most affected airports. New York City airports, no surprise. Newark, LaGuardia, JFK, Boston, Chicago, Ronald Reagan, where we are right now in Washington, Dulles, Orlando, Dallas. I throw Toronto on the list. It's a critical airport, of course, in North America. It's also affected. And so watch out as you are traveling, not just today, but over the coming days and weeks. You are likely to be affected by weather and by staffing issues as well, Joe.
You know, Tom, I think a lot of people are wondering specifically about this weekend, the 4th of July holiday. Could we see some major delays? Could we see a holiday mess?
You know, it's always about the weather, right? However, here are the numbers. We're expecting 24 million people to be flying between now and July 5th. So that's a big stress on the system. There is another variable, another factor at work here, and that is that air traffic control facilities are right now, 77% of them are understaffed. And as a result, they've been slowing the air traffic into especially the JFK, Newark, LaGuardia, the New York City and the Boston area. Now, just yesterday, the CEO of United Airlines is essentially calling out the FAA, saying that the FAA and their staffing issues, that's a big reason why we've had so many delays and cancellations over the last few days. This is not a new problem. The FAA has been behind on staffing at air traffic control facilities for years, got aggravated, of course, during the pandemic. They couldn't put people through training. They're trying to catch up. But, Joe, listen to this stat. Right now, a quarter of every controller on the job, a quarter of all the controllers are trainees. So they have a real problem right now with having enough people on the job to handle the flow. And as a result, they're cutting and reducing that flow, especially into New York City.
Wow, that is a lot of trainees. So, Tom, you always have the best tips for travelers. So if you are having issues, what are your best options here? Will the airlines offer anything like waiving fees to change or cancel flights?
Let me give you my cell phone number. You can call me anytime, any question you have. Listen, here's the bottom line. You know, you got to, and I'm sorry to use a cliche. I hate the cliche, but pack your patience, especially this summer. Be ready. Get to the airport 2 hours early if you can. You want to try to fly early in the morning, not later if you can. And then you want to, if you are inconvenienced, if something happens, the app is going to be your fastest way to rebook yourself. Don't stand in line at the airport if you can avoid it. Get on the app right away and try to rebook yourself. The airline will almost always automatically rebook you, but it may not be on the flight that's most convenient for you.
All right, Tom's number, 555-555-55. Tom, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Pretty much. That's it. Yep.
Coverage continues with your morning news now. Weather forecast. Meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us now. Michelle, good morning.
Hi there, Joe. Great to see you. And we're going to continue to watch this heat over the next several days into the weekend. We've been watching it for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's all due to an area of high pressure that's parked in place. So we're going to see it parked in place in the near future. 49 million Americans under some sort of heat alert, whether it's a heat advisory, that's in orange, a heat watch, that's in that darker pink, and then the hot pink is your excessive heat warning. That includes portions of Arizona, also Texas, into the Gulf Coast states. So we're going to see temperatures soaring once again into the triple digits, unrelenting heat. We've seen it all month long. We're looking at temperatures today into the triple digits in so many areas. San Antonio, 103. That's not the only problem. You factor in the humidity off the Gulf and the moisture, it makes it feel warmer than that. So it's going to feel like 111 in Lake Charles. It'll feel like 111 also in New Orleans. It's going to feel like 107 in Houston. And these numbers have been day after day, week after week. The reason why we have an area of high pressure, heat dome is what we're calling it, kind of parked in place. So the jet stream is sort of cutting the country into two. We have an area of low pressure to the north over the Great Lakes. So this is called a locked pattern. And we're looking at unseasonably cool temperatures in the northwest. We're looking at unseasonably cool temperatures in the northeast as well, the extreme northeast. And we're looking at that area of high pressure just spinning in that heat, kind of like a heat pump, bringing in those temperatures and also the moisture. So as we go throughout time here, it's only going to get worse. We're going to see this heat dome kind of intensifying, growing larger, crawling slowly to the east and expanding. So we're going to see that heat extending into portions of Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, and this is into the July 4th weekend. So we're looking at a very hot weekend for many. St. Louis, 93 on Wednesday, 101 on Thursday. Nashville, you're going to be dangerously hot too by Thursday, near 100 degrees. Little Rock into the triple digits as well on Thursday, 105. And look at Fort Worth, 102 on Tuesday, 104 on Wednesday, 103 on Thursday, and that's not counting the humidity in the air because we're going to feel warmer than that. So we're looking at record-breaking temperatures. We're looking at relentless temperatures over the next couple of days. Look at all these expected highs. Where you see those red dots, that's where we're expecting those record-breaking temperatures. So this is a noteworthy story. It's a historic story. And then as we go throughout this weekend, finally seeing a little bit of a shift. We're going to see that ridge weaken a bit and push further to the south. So hopefully by next week, we're looking at some better conditions, but still warm in Memphis on Saturday, 99. Sunday, we're looking at 92. All right, that's the heat story. Let's talk about the storms. We had heavy rainfall overnight in the northeast to the mid-Atlantic portions of the Carolinas. That cold front is slowly pushing off the ocean, into the ocean. So we're looking at that heavy rain falling in the ocean. But, Joe, we're going to see a reignition of those storms later on this afternoon. So the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast, you want to bring your umbrellas because we could see some strong storms, and also looking at the severe storms in portions of the Central Plains. Lots to talk about. Back to you.
All right, Michelle, thank you so much. This morning, the Supreme Court is expected to issue rulings on several outstanding cases, among them some landmark issues with far-reaching implications. We're talking about cases that focus on affirmative action, LGBTQ rights, and the future of President Biden's student loan forgiveness program. For more on this, we're joined by NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos. Danny, good to have you with us to break it all down. So earlier this morning, we talked about the affirmative action cases. Those are getting a lot of attention. But there's also President Biden's student loan forgiveness program. I mean, this could impact the financial futures of like 40 million Americans. Remind us, what's at stake here? What are both sides arguing?
The key here is cancellation by the president of student loan debt, a, quote, waiver or modification of regulations, rules, all these other things. Does it fit within those two words? That is really the key issue here. Does the president have the authority to simply cancel all of this debt under language that says waive or modify? And that occupied a lot of the court's time. Another thing that occupied the court's time, which means they may not even reach that issue, is yet again the issue of standing. Whether or not these states have standing to bring this case in the first place. One of the things that the justices pointed out is they didn't sue on behalf of an entity called Mohila, which handles the actual loans. They sued on behalf of the states. Now, why they didn't isn't exactly clear, because Mohila probably had standing to sue. It may have been a strategic decision. We don't know. But the bottom line is, do these states have standing to assert the pain or harm caused to an entity that could have arguably been harmed by the debt when the states really have a tenuous harm that they're alleging? So really interesting issues here.
Another big case we're watching involves LGBTQ rights. This is a web designer who denied services to same-sex couples. I remember a few years ago we had the Baker situation. The court ruled in favor of. This one's different. Remind us what's going on here, what both sides are arguing.
The issue here is the provision of a web design service, is that speech or is it a sale? Because if it's a sale and the web designer doesn't want to simply sell to someone because of who they are, then that probably violates Colorado law. If instead it is speech, if web design is speech, and this came up at oral argument, is it plug and play? Are you just typing words into a template for a web design? You know, nowadays you can design logos, you can design all kinds of things, mostly on your own, by just going online and running them through a program. So is this plug and play, as it was called, or is this actual speech? That's what the court is grappling with, whether this web design is simply a sale of a product, in which case you cannot discriminate against people, or is it speech that is being compelled in violation of what the speaker wants to say, in which case it becomes a First Amendment issue.
All these decisions coming about a year after the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. We have a recent Quinnipiac masthead poll. It found among registered voters, 59% of Americans do not approve of the job the Supreme Court is doing. This feels like such a change from years ago when the court seemed to sort of be above politics. Does this type of disapproval have any sort of impact on the justices at all when they're coming to conclusions?
Well, it's hard to read their minds, but in my opinion, the answer is a resounding no, for two reasons. Number one, the essence of the Supreme Court. We appoint our justices and all of our federal judges for life. Now, that's very close to a monarchy, but we did it for a very important reason. The framers did. It's to insulate them from politics, to insulate them from the people you see with the signs picketing out front of the Supreme Court. The Constitution is designed so that the justices don't care about those people because the justices and the court and the judiciary are supposed to be immune from outside influence. And the other thing, more practical, the reason I think the justices don't worry about it is that even if they think it's a problem, they probably think it's the other side's fault. Oh, it's the conservative justice's fault, or it's the liberal justice's fault. I think they each, no matter what, see their duty as one that is driven by the law. Whether they're liberal, conservative, it doesn't matter. I think when you get to that level, and these are all very accomplished lawyers and judges, I think they're able to separate themselves from the political controversies that rage outside of the courthouse. At least, Joe, I hope.
All right, Danny Zavalos, we know you'll be around to help us break down these decisions in the coming days. Thank you so much. In Russia this morning, President Putin addressed military personnel at the Kremlin in the wake of Saturday's aborted mutiny by the mercenary Wagner group. Putin hailed his forces for, quote, preventing a civil war. Comments come after Russia's security service dropped its criminal case into the armed rebellion. NBC News chief international correspondent Keir Simmons has the latest from Moscow. Keir, good morning.
Joe, good morning to you. President Putin from behind the walls of the Kremlin, reasserting himself this morning, standing in front of those mass ranks of his security services and holding a minute's silence for those who died in the extraordinary events over the weekend, and telling them no troops had to be pulled away from the front line in Ukraine. Late into the night, President Putin met with the heads of his security services. And this morning, another dramatic announcement. Charges against this weekend's mutineers have been dropped. Vladimir Putin's 10 p.m. address to the nation focused on one man, while never mentioning Yevgeny Prigozhin by name, slamming what he called a militarized mutiny led by traitors who would see Russia choked in bloody strife. Facing down a defiant Prigozhin whose aborted rebellion rocked Russia, but insisted in his own 11-minute message that he did not try to topple President Putin. Rather, he says it was a protest against how his Wagner group were being treated. Again, demanding changes to Russia's military leadership, saying he stopped the bloodshed when he was offered exile in Belarus. This morning, the Belarus president, an ally of President Putin, saying the rebellion was painful to watch. If Russia collapses, we will all die, he says. Prigozhin's Wagner group was cheered by Russians after they stood down on Saturday. Some even took selfies. This morning, President Zelensky traveling to the front line, taking pictures with Ukrainian soldiers. And amid the fallout from the weekend's events, his counteroffensive is advancing, he says, giving few details, but calling Monday a happy day. President Biden with his own message to Russia.
We gave Putin no excuse to blame this on the West or to blame this on NATO. We made clear that we were not involved. We had nothing to do with it,
While here on the streets of Moscow, ordinary Russians sharing their reactions to these uncertain times.
I want to live in a country without this problem.
People on Russian side, they also dying.
What happens now, do you think?
I don't know.
And President Putin overnight saying that Wagner troops can join the Russian army or return to their families or go to Belarus. Russia insisting that Wagner is being disarmed, Joe, while saying the National Guard here will now get heavy weapons. Joe?
All right, Keir Simmons in Moscow. Keir, thank you. Let's bring in retired Colonel Matt Dimock for more on this. He is the former director for Russia and Eastern Europe at the National Security Council. Colonel Dimock, good to have you with us. So let's start with those comments from Putin. Does his messaging change the way he's perceived at all on the world stage? Does it reveal any cracks in his persona, or do you think it maybe helped repair some of the damage the Wagner Group inflicted over the weekend?
I think Putin suffered some near-term damage with this incident, but he's got plenty of tools at his disposal to repair that damage and sort of restore his persona. You know, he's got one job as the leader of the system that he's created. He encourages rivalries amongst the elites, but it's his job to make sure that he tamps down those rivalries before they get out of control. And in the case of Prigozhin, he spectacularly failed at that task. So as you see him today, he's setting out to show that he's firmly in control of all the security services who, of course, demonstrated their loyalty, did pitch in with Prigozhin when they had the opportunity. And he's going to demonstrate that he's still firmly in command of the security services, of his own security, of the Russian government, and that he's not going anywhere anytime soon.
This rebellion came to a quick end because Belarus brokered a deal between Russia and the Wagner troops that allowed Prigozhin and his troops to go into exile in Belarus without facing prosecution. Do you think Prigozhin remains a threat to Putin? Is there any world in which he's emerging as a political alternative to Putin?
I'm not sure that Prigozhin ever really was a threat to Putin. Remember, he set out to decapitate the Minister of Defense and the Chief of General Staff and was not targeting Putin directly. That being said, Prigozhin's power was at high tide when he and his forces seized Bakhmut over a month ago. And since then, the Russian government has been slowly constraining his ability, has been diminishing the Wagner Group, and Prigozhin pretty much lost any bit of his power. It all evaporated when he cut the deal with Putin and now is in exile in Belarus. So I think Prigozhin's been taken off the table effectively. Putin's got every tool at his disposal to continue to dispense with Prigozhin, constrain his ability to move and to operate. And I think we're seeing the end of Prigozhin as any kind of political force or threat to the Putin regime in the long term.
Does this deal between Russia and Belarus change the dynamics at all between those two countries?
It doesn't change the dynamics. They've been headed down this road for a long time, and Belarus has become a loyal and subordinate ally for Putin and has been willing to give up big chunks of its sovereignty in order to be in a union with Russia and to be a close ally of Putin. So this is another example of Lukashenko being helpful to Putin because it secures Lukashenko's position as in his precarious position there in Belarus. So it doesn't really change the dynamic, but it certainly is helpful for Lukashenko to prove that he's a loyal ally.
All right, Colonel Matt Dimock, always appreciate your analysis. Thanks for joining us this morning. This morning, there is a major new development in the ongoing investigation into former President Trump and his handling of classified documents. We are hearing for the first time an audio recording in which Trump appears to discuss classified documents with people who did not have security clearance. NBC's Garrett Hake has the latest.
These are the papers. This was done by the military, given to me.
In his own words, former President Trump in a newly surfaced audio recording that's expected to be used as evidence in his federal case involving classified documents. In it, he appears to acknowledge he knowingly held on to a classified Pentagon document about a potential attack on Iran. The 2.5-minute audio tape obtained by CNN shows Mr. Trump discussing what he calls the, quote, highly confidential document.
I'll show you an example. He said that I wanted to attack Iran. Isn't it amazing? I have a big pile of papers. This thing just came up. Look. This was him. They presented me this. This is off the record, but they presented me this.
That conversation, according to the special counsel, took place during a meeting at Mr. Trump's New Jersey golf club in July 2021 with 2 staffers, a publisher, and a writer who was working on a memoir of Mark Meadows, his former chief of staff. Mr. Trump referencing the document more than once on the tape, and at times even jokes about it being, quote, highly confidential.
It is like highly confidential, secret. This is secret information.
In a Fox News interview last week, the former president claiming there were no documents shown in that meeting.
That was a massive amount of papers and everything else talking about Iran and other things. And it may have been held up or may not, but that was not a document. I didn't have a document per se. There was nothing to declassify. These were newspaper stories, magazine stories, and articles. I'm just saying.
But the recording appears to tell a different story.
Yeah. See, as president, I could have declassified it. Now I can't, but this is classified.
Now we have a problem.
The former president, who pled not guilty to a 37-count indictment accusing him of taking classified national security documents with him when he left the White House, then obstructing the government's efforts to get them back, lashing out overnight on social media, accusing the special counsel of having, quote, spun the tape, as well as saying without evidence that he illegally leaked it and calling it an exoneration. Now, NBC News has reached out to the special counsel's office for response to those claims overnight, but so far we haven't heard back. Mr. Trump and his campaign are both out with new statements this morning, insisting he did nothing wrong. But several legal experts and former prosecutors who've heard that tape have largely reached a different conclusion, Joe. They say it's incredibly damning.
All right, Garrett Haake, thank you so much, Garrett. Coming up on this hour of Morning News Now, it is a potential game changer in the weight loss industry. Some promising new data on one experimental drug is showing some life-changing results not seen in any other weight loss drug on the market. We're going to break down the science in a moment. But first, dueling campaign events from the 2 top GOP presidential hopefuls, former President Trump and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, both in the key primary state of New Hampshire. More on the messages they're bringing to voters up next. Stick around. Welcome back. The 2 leading candidates vying for the Republican nomination for president are heading to New Hampshire today. Former President Trump and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis are set to hold dueling events about 40 miles from each other. Today's campaign stops come as Trump continues to hold a large lead over his GOP rivals, according to our latest NBC News poll. NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard joins us now from New Hampshire with a preview. Vaughn, good morning to you. So what can we expect from the rivals today? What's on their agendas?
Well, you should say for Ron DeSantis, the top of his agenda is continuing to try to connect with New Hampshire voters, because you look at that national poll from NBC that just came out, Donald Trump actually expanding his lead here from the spring. And so for Ron DeSantis, he made a cross-country trip after visiting the Texas-Mexico border yesterday. He's going to continue to roll out his immigration proposals here, but continue to try to do the groundwork it'll take to introduce himself. This is a state that's a little bit of a challenge for him. This is a state that has elected a pro-abortion rights governor several terms in a row now here in New Hampshire, but he has his sights on Donald Trump, who is not only speaking at a women's luncheon here this afternoon, but then is going to open up his campaign headquarters here in New Hampshire.
So, Vaughn, let's talk a little more about the DeSantis campaign. You kind of touched on it there, but explain to us some of the challenges this Florida governor is facing while seeking support from voters in New Hampshire, the live free or die state.
Right. The biggest uphill battle for him is, frankly, he doesn't have the apparatus that Donald Trump does. This is Donald Trump's essentially 3rd time running for president, and he has a campaign list, he has a voter contact list, and right now for Ron DeSantis, he has seen, at one time he had a lead earlier this year in polling, and now for him, the struggle is where do you invest the money and the campaign resources? Right now, they've only spent about $75,000, the super PAC aligned with him, on advertising here in New Hampshire, because there's a lot of question marks as to whether sort of the conservative Republican governor that he is in Florida, whether that meshes with sort of this New England, more moderate type of Republican that the state has a history of backing in primaries like the one that will take place here just 6 months from now.
And let's talk about Trump. We know he is pushing ahead with his reelection bid despite the legal troubles surrounding him. We just heard about out the latest a few moments ago from Garrett Haake. So what can we expect from his campaign this summer as he balances running for president with defending himself in court?
Right. Well, you could say that Ron DeSantis is facing from some political headwinds. It's Donald Trump who is facing the legal ones. And a new audio tape that was obtained by CNN last night, that conversation that Donald Trump had at Bedminster in the summer of 2021, in which he talked about having documents that were classified in his possession. Well, in this tape, he explicitly says that they are secret, and he tries to suggest that it is off the record. You can hear the rustling of the papers as he shows them. He acknowledges that he was able to declassify them as president, but says that he's not able to now. Donald Trump has not denied that this recording is accurate. He has said, though, that it is spun out of context. At the same time, prosecutors are moving forward with this trial. The judge is setting dates as we speak here, and this latest tape and now the public's airing of it here is really tough for him as he continues to try to mount ever-changing defenses, Joe.
All right, Vaughn Hilliard in the all-important primary state of New Hampshire. Vaughn, thank you so much. To international news now, starting in Chile, where days of rainfall have led to deadly flooding. Let's bring back NBC News foreign correspondent Claudio Lavaga for that and other international headlines. Claudio, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. Well, at least 2 people have died and at least 3 others are reported missing after heavy rain caused widespread flooding all across Chile. Well, now at least 1,000 other people were evacuated and 400 were left homeless. The Interior Minister of Chile declared a state of disaster in the areas of Valparaiso and Biobío, the most affected by the floods. Authorities warned residents to be careful as the heavy rain and risks of flooding will continue for a while. Let's go to Toronto in Canada, where Olivia Chow, a 60-year-old left-wing progressive standard-bearer, has won the mayoral election. Chow, who was born in Hong Kong and arrived in Canada aged 13, said Toronto is a city where an immigrant kid can be standing in front of you as your new mayor. She also called the city a place of hope and a place of second chances and promised to build it as a city that is more caring, affordable, and safe. And let's end this short tour of the world in Saudi Arabia, where hundreds of thousands of Muslim pilgrims are heading to the Mecca Circle in Kaaba, Islam's holiest site. Since the annual Hajj pilgrimage started Monday, more than 1.8 million pilgrims have already arrived in and around the Mecca, with authorities estimating the number will reach the pre-COVID level of 2 million. The Hajj is arguably the most important pilgrimage and spiritual experience for all Muslims around the world. Back to you.
All right, Claudio, thank you so much. Back here in the States, the man accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students is expected to appear in court today for a pretrial hearing. Brian Kohberger is currently facing 4 counts of first-degree murder. Prosecutors say they will be moving forward with their motion to seek the death penalty. NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin joins us now from Moscow, Idaho, with more from the families. Aaron, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. That's right. Prosecutors now argue that if convicted of the quadruple homicide, Brian Kohberger should be put to death. This morning, the father of one of the victims reacting to that news.
They didn't have to come here.
This morning, in an NBC News exclusive, the father of victim Kaylee Gonsalves reacting to news that prosecutors plan to seek the death penalty against Brian Kohberger, the man accused of murdering his daughter and 3 other students at the University of Idaho.
It's a relief. I'm glad that we're in a situation of strength and the evidence is there, and we feel that we can, they can go forward with this.
The family's attorney believes it's a clear-cut death penalty case.
If you're not going to pursue the guy for a death penalty on a case like this, who are you going to pursue for a death penalty?
In just a few hours, Kohberger is set to return to a Moscow, Idaho courtroom for another pretrial hearing. His legal team is requesting records from last month's grand jury indictment of their client and are asking the judge to pause legal proceedings until they receive those materials. Already a key part of the case for both sides, Kohberger's DNA and where it was and wasn't found. While prosecutors said in a court filing earlier this month that Kohberger's DNA is a statistical match to DNA found on a knife sheath at the scene of the murders, his lawyers say authorities did not find any victim DNA in his apartment, office, home, or vehicle.
Is this your car? He's had over a month before those search warrants were executed after the crime to throw away his clothes, wash his car, clean out his apartment. There's multiple ways to explain the lack of DNA in his vehicle, in his apartment. There's not a lot of ways to explain his DNA on the sheath of the murder weapon.
The legal battle is also unfolding just over a mile from the scene of the quadruple homicides. The off-campus home where Madison Mogen, Kaylee Gonsalves, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin were killed was set to be demolished. Before a judge ruled it should be preserved. Now the University of Idaho says they hope to have the house down ahead of the new school year. The Gonsalves family says the house should be preserved through trial.
I don't want to sit 6 months from now and hear somebody in the court case say, well, I really wish we could be in the house right now.
Once the case is over, then they can move on. But right now, it's the crime scene.
Brian Kohberger has yet to enter a plea. A judge has entered a not guilty plea on his behalf. And regarding the death penalty here in Idaho, Joe, there's a new law allowing for death by firing squad if the chemicals necessary for lethal injection cannot be located. That law goes into effect July 1st.
All right, Aaron McLaughlin, thank you so much. Coming up, we're going to take you inside the rapidly expanding industry of weight loss medications with some promising new information about potentially life-changing results from just one experimental drug. We'll be right back. We're back with some groundbreaking news in the medical world. The FDA has approved the first ever treatment aimed at helping kids who deal with hair loss and alopecia. It's a once-a-day pill. It is called Litfulo, and it'll be available for kids as young as 12. According to Pfizer, which manufactures the pill, the treatment should be available to patients within weeks. Experts say nearly 20% of people with alopecia are diagnosed before age 18. We're sticking with medical news and taking a closer look at a new experimental drug that is making waves for weight loss treatment. This new medication is one of several being marketed right now to obese patients for weight loss. And early trial research shows it's helping people lose up to a quarter of their weight. NBC News senior national correspondent Stephanie Gosk has the details.
Hey there, we've been talking a lot about the revolution in weight loss medication. The science is moving quickly, and Eli Lilly believes the newest generation of this medicine will be groundbreaking. I had a chance to visit the company headquarters in Indianapolis.
Eli Lilly's new drug is called retatrutide.
When we saw how they worked in our preclinical studies and then when we saw how it worked in patients for the first time, we knew we were on the verge of a breakthrough.
Unlike FDA-approved drugs Ozempic for diabetes and Wegovy for weight loss, which harness one hormone to control eating, according to Eli Lilly, retatrutide harnesses three.
We think that a medicine like this could someday offer the same levels of weight loss that you can see with bariatric surgery.
In retatrutide's second clinical trial, patients with obesity lost up to 17.5% of their body weight, more than 40 pounds, in 24 weeks, nearly 60 pounds in 48 weeks. Jacinthia Jesse weighed close to 300 pounds before taking part in the trial.
It has been a roller coaster ride for many of my adult years.
While some participants were given a placebo, she believes she got the real injection, dropping 60 pounds.
Having to put on clothes and realize that this is not my size anymore. Like, I literally have to go to the Goodwill, give these away. That was just life-changing to me.
Testing is in its early stages. A submission for FDA approval is years away. But Eli Lilly is hopeful it will get FDA approval for a different drug this year, the weight loss version of its approved diabetes medicine, Mounjaro.
There are analysts who say it'll be the most lucrative drug ever made. Hyperbole?
Probably, yes. I think at Lilly, we try not to focus too much on which drugs are going to be really big sellers. What we try and focus on is, are we making medicines that treat a deep unmet medical need?
Eli Lilly is not alone in its push to research new drugs. Other pharmaceutical companies are doing the same, while obesity doctors say the medications that are on the market have already changed lives.
It's been transformative, to say the least. I think it's given so many people hope that felt sort of helpless in this fight against the disease of obesity.
The next step will be getting the medication in pill form, which Eli Lilly is working on. Easier to make and easier for people to access.
We hope that obesity will be something that we can reverse for the majority of patients. And in doing so, it's not just about how they look or how they feel. It's for patients, it's really, we believe, a change in their overall health.
We should mention the pill Eli Lilly is working on is for diabetes. It's moving to stage 3 trials, the last step before submitting for approval. The weight loss version is still a ways off. Back to you.
All right, Stephanie, thank you. Let's dig deeper with NBC News medical contributor Dr. Natalie Azar. So, Stephanie, this drug she was just talking about, it harnesses 3 hormones to control eating, whereas the others we've been talking about, Ozempic, Wegovy, they harness 1.
Right.
Why is that important, and what's the impact then of actually taking it?
You know, so it's funny. Sometimes when you have too much of something, that's not a good thing. But I think in the case of these weight loss medications, the more hormones a medication is targeting, the more efficacious it actually ends up being. And they've actually dubbed this drug Triple G because it's hitting 3 different hormones that all begin with G. Whereas, as you mentioned, Ozempic, Wegovy worked on 1, Mounjaro works on 2, this one works on 3. And they all basically are doing versions of the same thing, decreasing appetite, decreasing cravings, helping your body break down sugar more effectively, tweaking metabolism, all of these things that, frankly, are biological processes, Joe, that are going awry in obesity as a chronic disease.
So on top of the weight loss, research shows there are other benefits to this too, right?
Right. And so specifically in this latest Lilly drug and study, they didn't look at those secondary endpoints like hemoglobin A1C and cholesterol and you know, other cardiometabolic things. But a lot of the studies have, and a lot of them do show that they reduce systolic blood pressure. They do improve hemoglobin A1C. Of course, they all start off as diabetes medications. And doing all of those things, those secondary endpoints, are also going to, in the end, improve your cardiovascular health in addition to just the weight loss.
So next we're going to have, what, a longer phase trial
Phase
3 of this new drug?
Yep.
Explain to us what it is they're going to be. Is this light about to explode and take us out here?
Sounds like a fly.
What?
It's gone.
There we go, and it's gone. All right. We're all good. What will happen in this? What are they going to be looking for?
Yeah, I mean, basically, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. When you go from phase 2, phase 3, you're just it's just larger, and it's larger and it's longer, and they want to enroll, you know, that many more patients to see, number one, can they replicate this finding? I mean, a quarter of your weight loss, of your body weight as a loss, that is quite significant. So they just want to make sure that, number one, they can replicate that finding and that there aren't any new safety signals that could pop up, which happens in larger and bigger trials.
We see the goal now for these companies is to try and make this in pill form.
Yes.
What would that mean?
Yeah, I mean, and so just in terms of the pill, like there's every day there's new news on these medications. There are currently 4 candidates right now that are pill forms, essentially, of Wegovy and Mounjaro. They're all by, again, Lilly, Novo Nordisk, and Pfizer. Those are the ones that have their hat in the ring. And we're getting close. Novo has one that they're hoping to get approval by the end of 2023. Pfizer and Lilly both have drugs that are going into phase 3, which we talked about as the last leg. You know, so I think commercially available probably in the next year, we're going to have a pill version of these medications. So for a lot of people who are needle phobic, et cetera, easier to take. Primary care doctors probably will find it easier to prescribe. It's really going to change the landscape of treating obesity as well as diabetes.
Right. Lots to talk about. Dr. Natalie Azar, thanks for helping us break it down. We appreciate it. Coming up, we're going to bring you a new warning revealing billions of dollars for vital infrastructure repairs could be wasted, all because of outdated federal measures that some say don't account for the effects of climate change. We're going to break that down next on Morning News Now. We're back now with a new warning about our nation's aging bridges and highways. While the government has designated trillions of dollars to repair them, it may not be enough. Experts say a miscalculation about future climate conditions could put these projects at risk. CNBC senior climate correspondent Diana Olick joins us now to explain. Good morning, Diana.
Good morning, Joe. Yeah, federal spending from the new Infrastructure Act could be wasted because state highway and bridge projects are using an outdated government precipitation model to determine future flood risk. This, according to a new report from First Street, a climate risk firm.
All that money that's going into the infrastructure is being built to the wrong flood standard, meaning those roads will flood, those bridges will flood, and it is a big waste of money when it's a one-in-a-generational spend that we're actually using right now.
Currently, the only authoritative government source for precipitation data is from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. It's a model called Atlas 14.
This information is leveraged by communities and stakeholders all over the country to inform the engineering design of transportation infrastructure and other infrastructure all over the country.
But it has a major flaw.
It does not include any climate change information, and that's why we are looking to modernize it with NOAA Atlas 15.
But the updated model won't be done until 2026, after many of these infrastructure projects are underway or even done. For example, New Jersey's Route 18 rehabilitation, which received over $86 million in funding from the infrastructure law, is using the old Atlas 14 as a flood guide.
Where I'm standing right now, the believed 1-in-10-year event is actually a 1-in-4-year event, and over the next 30 years will go down all the way to a 1-in-2-year event, meaning every other year we would expect extreme precipitation to flood this location.
We're already seeing much heavier rain, snow, and flooding due to global warming, because when the atmosphere is warmer, it holds more water.
If you were building a road right now and you had to make sure that it wasn't going to flood, would you want to use Atlas 14?
I can't speak to how, some of those engineering decisions are made.
But we contacted the New Jersey Department of Transportation, which confirmed using Atlas 14, quote, as required by current standards, adding in part that they reviewed updated data as well from proposed stormwater management regulations. But that data, according to First Street, uses the same historical method as Atlas 14. That is not factoring in the future effects of climate change.
All right.
Joe?
Interesting report, Diana. Thank you so much. Coming up, it is being hailed as the future of automotive racing. Gas? No, thank you. Gear changes? Thing of the past. That classic roar of the engine? Not anymore. It's called Formula E, as in all electric, and it's taking the racing world by storm. You just may not hear it coming. We'll strap in next. Welcome back. F1's newest investors may look a little familiar. Actors Michael B. Jordan, Ryan Reynolds, and Rob McElhenney have invested in the Alpine racing team. The three bought into the deal under Reynolds' Maximum Effort Investment Group. Along with two other groups, the actors are buying 24% of the Alpine team, according to a statement. That deal is worth a massive $218 million. The Alpine team worth about $900 million now. This is, of course, not Reynolds and McElhenney's first venture into the sports world. 2 years ago, they purchased the Welsh soccer team Wrexham AFC, which just had that big parade. Some other racing news over the weekend. Portland, Oregon became just the fourth U.S. city to hold the Formula E race. You may have guessed it. The E stands for electric. NBC News chief environmental affairs correspondent Ann Thompson went to the track to learn more.
It has all the looks and feels of auto racing.
There's contact. I felt in the wall.
But not the sounds. This is Formula E. E as in electric. Among the 11 teams competing at the Portland, Oregon E-Prix, a legendary name in auto racing, Andretti Autosports. IndyCar champion Michael Andretti is CEO.
What's the attraction for you with Formula E?
What attracted me to it was the new technology. Racing is at the forefront of the technology, so we're seeing stuff that you're probably going to see in your road cars one day.
On the track this year, the Gen 3, billed as the fastest, most sustainable e-car yet. Alessandra Chiliberti is the technical manager.
So do you have two motors in this car?
Exactly. Enabling drivers to recharge the car through braking. Energy now captured from all four wheels.
We're not losing the energy, we're just storing that back into the battery for propelling the car.
Gone are the days when they had to switch cars in the middle of the race because the battery didn't last. Now the battery goes the whole race, some 53 minutes, at speeds of up to 200 miles per hour. Jake Dennis drives for Andretti.
Do you miss the sound of traditional racing?
No, you enjoy it. You enjoy having the peace and quiet, honestly. There's no noise, no vibration, super smooth. It's like a pleasure to drive one of these. You just hear the wind.
There are no gears and ideally no pit stops. Michael Andretti took me for a ride.
What should I expect?
I don't know. I never drove one around
I'm
here.
feeling real good about this.
We'll learn together. I needed a few more laps.
I think you did pretty well for your first time.
Okay.
But there's an even more important competition going on here, the race to sustainability. And everyone, from the owners to the vendors to the fans, can win.
Julia Paulet drives this effort. The car's electricity is generated from renewable energy.
Actually, this renewable energy here is coming from basically the waste cooking oils from your French fries that is turned into a biofuel that is called HVO.
A sport that CEO Jeff Dodds says is also a learning opportunity for fans.
They're seeing amazing racing brands, so they're seeing elite sport, but they're also seeing a platform to talk about sustainability.
To drive us into the future. Ann Thompson, NBC News, Portland, Oregon.
I love how they actually enjoy the peace and quiet. That does it for this hour of Morning News Now. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.